Welcome to the best YouTube channel ever. In today's video, we're going to talk about projection and what it means in psychology. It's a defense mechanism, subconscious defense mechanism that people often do to protect themselves in order to not face themselves. People may project onto you and you may not notice it in the moment because they may say things like, I'm trying to understand you, or I'm just trying to, sympathize with you. And I'm going to relate it to fitness, because what happens is that when you start working towards your goals, like your fitness goals, or even if it's not fitness, it can be just, you're just trying to live better, you're trying to be the better version of yourself. There will be people that will project how they feel onto you because they feel insecure. I think it's important to handle things with grace as much as you can, and to not necessarily give them a slack, if that's the slang word. Slack basically means like you let it slide, because projection is, I think, a form of, I want to say, abuse, although I'm not entirely sure. And I'm going to show you how you can avoid this altogether. Like if somebody says to you, their accomplishments mean nothing, or like that's not impressive, or they're saying things in a way to subconsciously defend themselves, or perhaps they are putting their feelings and their insecurities on you because they haven't faced it within themselves. So when you project, you see your own feelings, flaws, or insecurities in someone else, rather than admitting that they exist in you. I'll warn you that this can be very dangerous, because what happens is, if you are not aware that they are projecting onto you, you may start to take on their feelings, and they may have the power, if you are not careful, they may have the power to convince you that what you're doing is wrong, because that's how they feel. And so if you are not secure in yourself and you don't know who you are and why you do what you do, that may lead you to make different decisions that were not based off of what you decided, but rather what they decided. Action happens because facing certain truths about ourselves can feel threatening. This is why relationships, and for example, love, can be challenging. I'll give you an example. I was talking to an individual, and long story short, we hit it off and things were going well. But I was somebody where I would tell him, like, hey, this is not okay, right? Boundaries. And they, I would imagine, felt a certain way. They perhaps were triggered, or they didn't like that I set a boundary. And in a way, I was holding up a mirror to them, and I was saying, hey, this is what you're doing, and this has to stop. Okay? And if you want to be together, this has to stop. And simply all I was doing was holding up a mirror. And I asked them to face themselves. And people typically, if they are not aware of that, they may feel uncomfortable because they know that they have to face themselves. And so in return, or as a defense mechanism, they will project how they feel onto you so that they don't take the blame. All right, so there are 4 examples of projection. The first one is insecurity projection. So you feel unattractive, but you accuse others of being judgmental or shallow. The reality is that you're sensitive about your own looks. So this is something that will happen if you are, like, for somebody like myself, you may run into people where they feel insecure around you, and so that they want to bring you down to their level. Okay, so if you hear things like, we're trying to bring you back down to earth, or, calm yourself, or stop being so XYZ. Now, there's a difference between being confident and being conceited and arrogant. 3 completely different things. It's not arrogance if you can back it up. That's number 1. Number 2 is arrogance is basically somebody that, like, sincerely believes that they are much better than you or anybody else, and they wholeheartedly, truthfully believe that. Okay, that is another level. But if you are playfully, confidently, in a flirtatious way, confident in your abilities, then that's confidence. It can be very subtle, and it can be difficult to decipher what kind of person, what kind of traits this person has. And this is something where you can kind of evaluate somebody based off of patterns and time. That's another thing, is that you don't necessarily want to listen to what people say. You want to identify their patterns. What are their patterns? How do they behave? Because that really shows you somebody's true character. Words can be very deceitful, and anybody can say whatever. I mean, anybody can say, I'm the strongest person in the world, or I'm the most, smartest person in the world. But it's your patterns and your character and your behaviors that really define you as a person. So, and I think people often forget that. So, number 2 is anger projection. It's, for example, you're upset with somebody, but you insist that they are actually mad at you. But in reality, you are projecting your anger onto them, so that, again, you don't take responsibility, or saying things like, you put me in this situation to do X, Y, Z. No one can technically put you inherently in a situation. You have to put yourself in a situation. Now, somebody can ask you a question to perhaps put you in a situation, yes, to a certain extent, but there also comes a point where you have a choice to make, and you can decide for yourself, whether you're going to do X, Y, Z, right? That's a free will, right? You have that choice. Okay, number 3, blame projection. This is very common. I know this for sure. This even happens in fitness. When I used to be, a full-time trainer in person, I would get clients where there would be times where I would have to fire a client, and I would say, no, because I did my job. You're paying me for my services, which is to train you, and it's your responsibility outside of the 24-hour or 23 hours that I'm not with you to execute on what you need to execute. So let's say you made a mistake, but instead of owning it, you say things like, you're the one that messed this up, right? It's easier to shift the blame than to face guilt, because again, people may not want to face themselves. They don't want to hold that mirror up and face their mistakes. That's a very common one, blame projection. All right, so here are some signs that somebody might be projecting. So they never take accountability. They accuse you of feelings or intentions that might be completely off. They interpret neutral actions as personal attacks, and they twist conversations to avoid facing their own behavior. However you define personal development, depending on who you're around, this can even be family. Family is not always bloodline. Family can be chosen family, because sometimes bloodline can be very toxic. And bloodline, it even happened with Jesus. I mean, I think it was his mom and Joseph, I think. They didn't believe him, and he left home and built his own family, essentially. And he said, it's a verse in the Bible where, family is not bloodline. Family can be chosen family. And so sometimes, you may have to remove yourself from your family and, build your own life, essentially, and build your own family. Because family, yes, they are bloodline, yes. However, there comes a point where something can be really toxic, and a relationship with, let's say, your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, can get so toxic to the point where it's time for you to detach and to be your own person and move on from the trauma that you had growing up. And everybody has trauma in every family. No family is perfect. It's just a matter of working through that to overcome that together, at least attempts to. And if for whatever reason you can't, because they don't want to meet you where you are, or they don't understand you, then you are not obligated to stay with people that do not understand you, because that is not your job. You're not here to make other people understand you. You are here to understand yourself. Detach and you can grow, right? I think oftentimes people think, well, they're family. Yes, they're family, but family can also be toxic. And at the end of the day, family are people. People are people, and you can find other people that will become your family. They don't have to be your bloodline. Family will project onto you because you guys are so close that it almost turns toxic, and sometimes there can be a loss of respect. So just something to keep in mind. I probably will make a separate video talking about that, because again, you don't have to feel obligated to stay with family just because they're family, and that's it. You can make your own family. All right, so here are a couple things how to deal with projection. The first thing is to stay calm. So there is a quote by Osho where he says, nobody can offend me without my permission. So if somebody offends you, think of it like this. If somebody offends you, think of it like they're taking a dart and they're throwing the dart at you. Okay, if I throw a dart, I throw a dart at the wall. If I throw it and the wall moves, I won't get the target, right? It's the same thing with projection or with criticism or offensive whatever. If somebody throws a dart at you, like they want to push your buttons, you don't have to take it. You can simply move and let that dart fall, or let it fall back to them. Because when you give somebody your energy and you explain your decisions or why you do what you do or what have you, you are essentially taking that load off of their plate. Okay. And they will like that, because why are they projecting and why are they communicating to you what they're feeling? Because they want attention usually, right? They want attention and they want to feel validated. And if you don't agree and you can acknowledge that they're actually projecting onto you rather than giving you observations to different things, then you can turn it back from you and push it onto them. So if somebody says, you're dumb, you don't have to answer. You just, okay, and move on, right? And then they're going to be like, what? I was expecting a negative reaction from this person. But no, you stayed calm and you know who you are. And what they're saying is dumb, because they are now projecting, because they feel insecure. They're going to say that you're dumb, when in reality, they are dumb, right? So that's very important. Number one, stay calm, okay? And how do you stay calm is by breathing, right? In through your nose, hold it, exhale for like 3 seconds. Do a couple of those and you'll typically will calm down. Number two is to set boundaries. So if don't accept blame that isn't yours, right? So if somebody says it's your fault, but it's not your fault, then don't take the blame. I think people often may feel threatened, they may feel insecure, and they may want to people please. And here's the kicker though, is that when you apologize for something that you didn't do anything wrong for, you are essentially lowering your value, okay? Now there's a difference between apologizing for things that you're wrong, were wrong for, and it's also like a difference between that and saying things like, I'm sorry that this happened, or I'm sorry that you feel that way. And there's nothing wrong with doing that either. That shows accountability and that shows maturity, emotional maturity. All right, the fourth thing on how to deal with projection is to reflect inwardly and remove yourself from the environment. So like I said, if you are dealing with maybe family, you're living with family or whatever, and they're toxic, then it's very much in your benefit to remove yourself from this environment, because it's going to hinder you more than you realize and more than you can imagine. It's not always what you say, it's how we say things. So, if you feel like somebody's projecting onto you, you can use your discernment to determine whether this person is even capable of listening and capable of hearing what you have to say, and actually making an attempt to monitor themselves and change. What does your gut tell you about this person? All right, so that's a little bit about projection. And again, if you are going to get into fitness or you get into anything like self-development, it's not uncommon to be facing things like that. I've definitely faced it a lot, basically like for a long time. And usually if you are, you invest in your aesthetics and your brains, people will sometimes feel insecure and they will sometimes try to sabotage or try to put that onto you, so that you feel bad about yourself. And it's important to recognize those things early on so that you know who to keep distance from people, like which people to keep distance from, and then which people to kind of keep close. All right, so if this helped you, consider subscribing to my channel, liking the video, sharing it for more. You can click my information, my Buy Me a Coffee page down below. I'm offering like consulting, basically, like if you need someone to talk to. I am building out a couple things to offer that as well. But this is a mix of stuff, because I think psychology is really important as much as fitness.